Hey, ambitious dentists. Today, we're going to be talking about where do you want to take your practice. We're going to talk about setting your boat, rowing in a very specific direction, be able to reach your horizon to where you can actually say, hey, I'm happy with where I am. Something that's really important to do, something that we as business owners don't do very often, especially in the middle of the year. There's not a lot of time to do it. Most people focus on doing this at the end of the year. So this is your reminder to come in and to say, hey, I need to assess this and make sure that where we're heading is the correct place. And if you're already in that boat rowing towards the horizon, you need to make a different target to where you're heading to. This is your reminder. So let's get into it. First, the most important question to talk about whenever you're talking about being a dental practice owner and a business owner is, where do you want to take your business? What do you want out of this thing that we call business? Are you looking to just to make the most amount of money possible? Is that really the goal that you have? I think that a lot of people, when they start out in this industry, that is the goal, right? That is kind of where they think of, is like, I want to make good money. And that is not necessarily the wrong way to do it. I do think that if you stay on that course for too long, that kind of like personality, that kind of thought process can somewhat become a little bit toxic in terms of polluting the waters of what you're trying to accomplish. Is it wrong for everyone? No, I don't think it is. Just like some people can probably handle toxicity more than other people can. I think that the search for money is not always going to be the way to get to the end result for everyone. So in terms of the first question I'm going to pose to you and trying to think of like where you want to go with this thing, how to get the boat rowing in the right direction, is how much money really is enough, right? You got to think of that in terms of like an income level as well as like a savings level. So where do you want to go in terms of your net worth as a person, getting to a specific number of, hey, I want to have this much money. And at what age do you want to reach that? At what age do you want to get to there? Do you want to be 50? Do you want to be 60? Do you want to die with zero, which is a goal that a lot of people have? If you do want to die with zero, then you've got to be able to hit a certain number before you start trending to zero. I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, you got to think of like, where do you want to head in terms of everything? I can tell you, as a person who works with just tons and tons of dentists, one of the most unique, coolest things about the dental industry, of being a business owner inside of the dental industry and owning a dental practice, is that you can really choose your own adventure. There's a lot of different ways that you can make money as a dental practice owner. You can be an associate somewhere, make really good money being an associate if you can produce a whole lot of money, make really good income being just a practice owner, just owning a typical bread and butter practice. You can make really great money being a high volume practice. You can make really great money owning a bunch of practices and having it being associate driven. You make pretty decent money just owning one office and having that be associate driven. And you only work maybe a day or two a week. You can do a whole lot of things. So really the question of is like, how much is enough? I know it's a very large, wide breadth question, but at some point it's healthy to consider that. And the reason it's healthy to consider that is because along this path, sometimes people will hit that goal faster than you think. And one of the challenges of any type of goal when you're rowing that boat in a certain direction, for a lot of people, myself included, once you hit that certain goal, then part of the fun is the journey. Part of the fun is going to the destination. Sometimes you don't want to just stop at the destination. Sometimes you want to continue on the trip. I can remember whenever we started Tooth and Coin, I told my dad, and he's told me this before, Jonathan, you said whenever you hit 100 clients, you were probably just going to just stick with 100 clients and just be done. And I thought long and hard about when I got there, but ultimately I thought, if we stop at 100, then if I try and reinvest back into the business to build out really cool things and to make our services even better and things like that, we're going to be limited in what we can do. We're able to like grow the business and be a higher impact, higher value business if we can reinvest back into it. And that requires more clients, which means more team members. And it creates a whole cycle of growth. And I enjoy the building of the thing. I enjoy the building of the business. I enjoy the feeling that I've constructed something and that I'm helping more people, right? Some people, that's what they want. And I think that's a much healthier way of thinking about it, rather than thinking of, I want to just build out 20 dental practices to roll up to a DSO because I can get maximum dollars for it and, I don't know, go buy a racehorse or something. It's much more about what's going to make you happy. So in terms of the first question is, how much is enough in terms of how much money you want to make? The second question is, how are you going to get there? What's the path that you're going to take, and that choose your own adventure? I can tell you that there's a bunch of numbers that are out there with the averages that dentists make in terms of like being a single practice owner and things like that. The number that I came out in the last study I read about, it was pretty low. I don't think that average is correct. And maybe my sample size is incorrect because we have so many great entrepreneurial dentists in our firm. But I believe that our firm, for a single practice dentist owner, typically the dentist, if you're an owner of like a single location, single practice, you're the only dentist, you don't have an associate, maybe you got 5 ops doing somewhere between 1.5 million a year in revenue, then generally you can be making somewhere in the $400,000 to $600,000 range a year of take home. That's including paying yourself, distributions, benefits, etc. That's a pretty common number for practices in that range. Now, if you start going down from there, if you're not producing as much, or you're maybe more of a volume practice, which means more staffing costs and things like that, then that number shrinks down to maybe 250 to 450 in terms of like where you're going to be making money on that. In terms of those practice owners that want to own an associate-driven practice, I tell people, a lot of DSOs, they search for 15% margin pre-debt payments. So if you own $1 million dental practice that's doing $1 million a year in revenue, and you're the dentist there, and you're like, I don't really want to do the dentistry anymore, and you go hire a dentist to come do it for you, your aim on that $1 million is to be making around 100 to 150 grand a year with the other dentist doing the dentistry. You're still going to be the manager of the business, you're still going to be the runner of the business, and things like that. But that's generally how you should do it. And that's before you pay any debt on that practice. If you're an associate and you can produce a whole lot of money, like 1 to 1.5 million a year in revenue or collections, like net production on your own, that's not hygiene included, then you can probably go find an associate position that pays you anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000. It just kind of depends on where you land. I know that there's a lot of dentists out there that if you could go produce 1.5 million a year in dentistry on your own with their patient base, they probably happily pay you $300,000 to $400,000 a year in salaries. Now, like I said before, if that number is a really high number to you, if you're like, I can actually do a lot less, you can actually build a really great practice that isn't nearly as busy or as big. We've got a lot of practices that the practice is doing $700,000 to $800,000 a year in revenue. So collections, dollars deposited into the business account, and the owner is making $200,000 to $300,000. Still a pretty good size take home, but they don't have nearly as big of a practice, right? Now, all of these things have risk associated with them. The smaller practice is likely more risk. It shrinks. It's probably harder to grow back because you probably don't have the patient demands. Probably the reason you kept it small in the first place. The bigger practices, the same thing can kind of happen if you're in an area where your patients are like a certain demographic or work at a factory in your town or something like that, and that factory shuts down. There's just a lot of different components to it, and there's risk in every single one of these models. Dentistry is generally something that weathers recessions pretty well. However, it is not completely devoid of risk when it comes to business risk or demographic risk or standard risk or anything like that. The good news is that it is a medical service that you will always have demand for because everybody wants to look better and to especially feel better when it comes to their oral health. So if you're going to be going to numbers higher than that, you can make a ton of money owning multiple practices and things like that. It's a lot more work. You got to be cut from a certain cloth to be a person that wants to run or own a whole bunch of different practices. In terms of the biggest challenges that most of my practice owners face, that's one of two things. It's typically finding associates is the hardest thing to do, as well as finding new patients. Those are the two hardest things. What's really cruel about that is that if you find finding new patients is really easy, generally finding the associates is the hard thing for you. If you think that you're really good at finding associates, then usually finding the patients thing is the harder part. A second level down below that, in terms of things that are hard to do, is to teach somebody to produce quite a bit whenever they don't just naturally produce a lot of dentistry based off of treatment plan size, things like that, with patients. So in other words, if a dentist is doing $400,000 a year in net collections from their services, it's kind of hard to teach that person how to do 1.8 million a year in collections on treatment planning, like how to change their perspective and practice philosophy of how to do those things. That's a very different thing and something that obviously as CPAs I don't ever run into, but it is a piece that comes into the equation of what type of practice you're going to run at the end of the day. So all of that goes into context of understanding the type of practice that you're going to have after you've understood how much money you're wanting to make. So again, to tie that back into where we are today, you really need to look at your practice. Where are you heading? Are you there? Have you gotten to a point where have you made a decision on which of those practices types you're going to be? If you have, that's great. But this is your reminder to go and think, hey, am I still heading to where I want to be? Have I already made it to the destination? Have you already made it to the 1 to 1.2 million a year in revenue practice and you're happy where you are? Or do you want to change the goalpost a little bit? If you were a startup and you were starting up and 3 or 4 years in, you're doing $800,000 to $1 million a year in revenue, is that enough? If it isn't, then that's fine. But what does it take for you to get to that next level? What does it take for you to get to move from there to the next place? I see a lot of practice owners that when they're on that journey, they may conceptually know how to make it to the next step, but they may make some missteps along the way. What seems to be one of the biggest mistakes is whenever they do find it, they feel busy, they add in an associate and they don't realize that associate, when they hire that person, the owner is no longer going to make that much money. if the practice is not ready for it. There's an old rule of thumb. If you ever listen to the podcast, I'm not a huge fan of rule of thumbs, but generally speaking, you shouldn't really be thinking about adding an associate until you're like 1.2 to 1.5 million a year in revenue, as well as you've got a really healthy patient flow. If you don't do that, if you don't wait until there, then it very commonly is a really big cash suck on the business because you're paying that other person. If you remember the example I gave earlier about the dentist who has $1 million practice, pays somebody else to do the dentistry, and then the owner gets to take home 100 to 150. Well, that associate's probably going to be making somewhere around 2 to 250 on that. So the associate actually makes more than the owner in that example. And that's a surprise to a lot of dentists that are doing this for the first time. And so that's kind of my word of caution of like, hey, if you are there, if you've made it to the destination or you're really close to making it to the destination, then it's time to start thinking about if there's going to be any destinations after that. Is that just a stop along the way? Because one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that you are allowed to stop. You are allowed for that to be the destination. You are allowed for that practice to maintain at a certain point in time. Most business owners, again, they do like to go on and keep moving forward, but there's nothing wrong with staying where you are. Now, challenges do come up with this. There are pieces of the puzzle that can be difficult, but it's something that you're allowed to do. And the things that can be difficult when you decide to stay and maintain, if you've gotten to that destination, is, typically the cost of your staff and the cost of supplies and the cost of labs and everything like that, they typically go up. And so if those prices go up, that means that your cash flow increases outward. But in dentistry and medical services especially, cash flow does not tend to increase on the inflow because your fees very regularly are dictated by outside insurances, as well as this market demand. And if you raise your fees too high, then you won't have enough patient activity. They're going to go find somewhere else to be. So that can be a little bit of a challenge once you get to a certain size and scale. If you decide, hey, I'm no longer going to continue growing, what are you going to do if your office manager says that they want to raise every year and the rest of your staff as well? There's a pretty famous saying that people say, oh, your taxes are your most expensive thing that you spend on in your business. A lot of people from my industry say that, being the CPA industry, not the dental industry. It's just not true. The thing that almost every dentist has, their largest expense is their staff. It's their team. So your hygienist, your front office, your assistants, et cetera, those are typically your biggest expense as a business owner. The revenue that comes through your practice, on average, 25 to 30 cents per dollar coming in your practice as revenue is going to go out as staffing cost, whether it be through salaries or payroll taxes or benefits, whatever it may be. That's a large percentage of your revenue going to people, right? Which is fine because you are a medical service company. You are a service. You have to give service to people. People have to deliver that service. We're not at that point where you can go into the office, click a button, and they do a cleaning for you. You've got to actually have someone do that for you. And it's someone that you want to be there. You don't want to have a person there that you don't want there. So you're going to probably be willing to pay that person more money over time because if they're really good, then they're going to be attracted to other places. There's just a whole lot that you need to do with that. So again, first question was, where is it that we're going? How much money do we need to make? The third is, if you're on the way there, if you're almost there, do you need to pivot at that point? So this is just a reminder to do that. Pay attention to that. Be thinking of what your goals are as a business owner as a whole. From the business side, remember that the business fuels your personal net worth, your personal life. And your personal life is what takes the income from the business and use it in the way that you use it. You should really be looking at a financial planner. If you don't have answers to these questions, then this is what a financial planner is there to help you with. This is what a financial planner is going to be able to come in and talk to you about what your needs are, talk about what your goals are, talk about your life situation, talk about what you think the future is going to look like. And they're going to be able to help you calculate out what you need to reach in terms of being a net worth goal based off of whatever you're wanting to do. Like I said earlier, I was going to talk about this and the concept of Die with Zero. I think it's a really great book. I may have it over there on the bookshelf somewhere, but it's a great book. The concept is that eventually, whenever you do pass away, the goal should technically be to die with zero. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, I'd like to leave money for charities, or I'd like to leave it to family members, or whatever it may be. And that's a fine concept to do as well. This Die with Zero thing is a new thing. I think Bill Perkins is the name of the author of that book. His concept is that an efficient use of capital that you've acquired over time is to spend it on yourself, right? To spend it on yourself, to gain experiences in the world, and to fulfill whatever your goals and needs are in life. Maybe that is to give it to other people, but if that's the case, then So let's say you want to give $1 million to your kids. You got 3 kids. You want to give $3 million out. When you die, you should be dying with $3 million kind of on the nose to give to those kids, rather than making sure that's a 10, 20, $30 million, whatever it is. So the efficient use of capital is to be spending the money over time so that you maximize your life experiences for the cost of acquiring capital, which was the work that you put into it. If you want to do that, you should tell your financial planner that as well, because that's a part of the whole system. That's a part of the whole piece of the puzzle that is your life and your financial situation, which can be complex to unravel. I'm not a financial planner, so I don't have a bias in this, but I think this is where some financial planners kind of got a bad rap in the last maybe 10 to 20 years, because people were like, oh, money managers, they don't outpace the market. Well, that's not necessarily like the point of financial planning, at least the way I conceptualize it. The way I conceptualize it, that financial planner's role is to help you understand like where you are today. It's for you to help you understand and to communicate where you want to get to, and then set the roadmap for you. So if we continue with the analogy of getting in the boat to start rowing in a certain direction, they're going to show you where the boat even is. And then they're going to point to where the horizon is from a personal net worth standpoint, not necessarily from a business goal standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. Really great financial planners could probably also build in the business side of things too, but that's a story for another day. So anyway, so this is your reminder to check what your goals are, pay attention to them. And if it's time to pivot today, it's time to think about it, put them on paper. It's really helpful to write things down if you're trying to change how things are going. I've said it a few episodes back that you should set up a calendar reminder to do this once every few months, and that I would remind you on the podcast to do this as well. So this is your reminder to do that on the podcast. Take a look at your goals, make sure that they need to be adapted. They could be. And if you need help with defining those goals, if you need help with understanding those goals and setting the right path and being held accountable to it, reach out to a financial planner. It doesn't matter who, to someone that is going to help you with those things and defining those things and hold you accountable to it so that your plan can be put into action. So until next time, this is Jonathan Van Horn, Tooth and Coin. See you later. Thanks for tuning in to the Tooth and Coin podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with a fellow dentist or a practice owner who could benefit. Your word of mouth helps us spread financial wisdom throughout the dental community. So until next time, keep building that thriving practice.